My name is Skylar James. I'm 32 years old. And 3 weeks ago, I uncovered something that shattered everything I thought I knew about my life. It wasn't a rumor. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was the truth, written in my father's own handwriting. My father died on a cold Thursday morning. I was the one sitting beside him, holding his hand as the machine slowed and finally went silent. I remember staring at his face, waiting for something, anything that never came. My older sister, Victoria, was in Aspen on a ski trip. My mother stayed outside the ICU saying she couldn't handle it. So in the end, it was just me. A week later, we gathered in a polished law office downtown, the kind with marble floors and quiet voices. Relatives I barely recognized filled the room, all pretending to mourn. Then the lawyer began reading the will. To my daughter, Victoria James. He listed everything: $2, $4 million, the family estate, investments, jewelry, even my father's classic car collection. Then he paused. To my daughter, Skylar James. I remember holding my breath. I leave the sum of $1. $1. No explanation, no hesitation, just $1. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just sat there, feeling every pair of eyes on me, some pitying, some curious, some quietly satisfied. But 3 days later, while clearing out my father's study in our old house in Cedar Ridge, I found something that changed everything. A hidden drawer. Inside it, a letter, yellowed with age, sealed, dated the day I was born. My hands were shaking when I opened it. The first line read, "I never wanted a second daughter." I wish I could say I stopped reading right there, but I didn't. Because by the time I reached the last page, I finally understood everything. Before I continue, take a second to subscribe, but only if this story speaks to you. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every single one. What follows contains fictional elements and is aided by artificial intelligence to highlight the humanistic message and emotional experience. Hopefully, you will find something for yourself. Now, let me take you back to the night everything started to fall apart. I was wrapping up a late shift at the office when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost ignored it. Almost. But when I saw my mother's name on the screen, something in my chest tightened. She never called unless she needed something. I answered. "Your father's in the hospital," she said flatly. "Heart attack. You should go. No panic. No fear. Just instructions." I stepped outside into the cold night air. What about Victoria? She's in Aspen with friends. She can't make it back tonight. Of course she couldn't. "And you?" I asked. There was a brief pause, like even the question annoyed her. "I'll go in the morning. It's late. I have calls to make." That was it. "No, please. No, I'm scared. Just a task handed to me like always." I didn't argue. I learned a long time ago that arguing with my mother was like talking to a wall that had already decided you didn't matter. I grabbed my keys and left. The drive took 4 hours. 4 long, silent hours through an endless stretch of highway swallowed by darkness. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned pale. I kept repeating the same thought over and over, like a prayer I didn't fully believe. Maybe this time will be different. Maybe this time he'll finally see me. When I reached the hospital, the lights were harsh and unforgiving, buzzing overhead like something alive. A nurse pointed me toward the ICU without saying much. I walked past room after room filled with families, people crying, people whispering, people holding on to each other like they were afraid to let go. My father's room was quiet, too quiet. The only sound was the steady, mechanical beeping of machines. He looked smaller than I remembered. This man who had once felt so imposing, so impossible to please, now lay still beneath thin white sheets, fragile in a way I had never seen before. I pulled a chair closer and sat beside him. "Hey, Dad. It's me. Skylar." His eyelids twitched slightly, but they didn't open. I hesitated for a moment before reaching out and taking his hand. I hadn't done that since I was a child. His skin felt thin, cold, almost unfamiliar. "I'm here," I whispered. I came. The machines kept their rhythm. Outside the room, life continued. Nurses walked by. Voices echoed faintly down the hall. But inside, it was just me. And the man whose approval I had spent 32 years chasing. The man who had never once told me he loved me. I stayed there. One night turned into 2. Then 3. I barely slept. I barely left the room. Victoria called once. "How's Dad? Is he awake yet?" "Not yet," I said. "The doctors say it could go either way." A pause. "Okay. Keep me posted. I have a charity luncheon tomorrow, but I might rearrange things if needed." "It's fine," I said quietly. "I've got it." She didn't argue. My mother came by for a few hours each day. She would sit in the corner, scrolling through her phone, occasionally sighing like the whole situation was inconveniencing her. She never once said, "Go home. Skylar, get some rest. I'll stay." She never once offered to take my place. So I stayed, and in the stillness of those long nights, memories began to surface whether I wanted them to or not. My college graduation came back to me first. I remember standing there, scanning the crowd, searching for their faces. I told myself they were just late, that they wouldn't miss something this important. They finally showed up, 20 minutes after my name had already been called. They had missed my graduation because Victoria needed a new car that morning. They chose a dealership over me. And somehow, that had felt normal back then. My 16th birthday wasn't any different. Dad forgot entirely. No call, no message, nothing. When I reminded him at dinner that night, he didn't even look embarrassed. He just reached into his wallet, pulled out a $20 bill, and slid it across the table toward me. "Buy yourself something nice." That was it. No cake, no candles, no happy birthday, just that wrinkled bill, and the sound of Victoria laughing as she talked about the brand new laptop she had gotten the week before. I sat there smiling like it didn't matter, like I was used to it, because I was. On the second night at the hospital, a nurse came in to check his vitals. She glanced at me for a moment, taking in the dark circles under my eyes. The same clothes I hadn't changed out of since I arrived. "You're a wonderful daughter," she said gently. "Staying with him like this." I didn't know how to answer that. Was I wonderful? Or was I just someone who had spent her entire life trying to earn something that was never being offered by the third night? Exhaustion had settled into my bones. That was when he finally moved. Just slightly. His eyes opened, unfocused, drifting across the room until they landed on me. "Victoria," he whispered. The word hit harder than I expected. I swallowed, forcing my voice steady. "No, Dad. It's Skylar." But his eyes had already closed again, and as he slipped back into unconsciousness, his lips kept moving. One name, over and over. Victoria. Only Victoria. I tightened my grip on his hand and stared at the floor, pretending I didn't hear it. The next morning, everything changed. He woke up again, but this time, he was clear, present. And for the first time in my life, he looked at me like I mattered, like he actually saw me. "Sky." His voice was barely more than air. I leaned in closer. "I'm here. The desk." He rasped. "My study." "There's something." My heart started pounding. "What is it? What's in the study?" His hand suddenly tightened around mine, stronger than I thought he was capable of. You need to see the drawer, the hidden. The machines beside him began to beep faster. A nurse rushed in, then another. Someone shouted for a doctor. Dad, I said, panic rising in my chest. Stay with me. Please stay. His eyes locked onto mine, and for a split second, I saw something there I had never seen before. Not indifference, not disappointment. Something heavier. Regret. Maybe. Or guilt. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so. The sound of the machines cut him off. A sharp, piercing alarm filled the room. Suddenly, everything moved too fast, hands pulling me back, voices overlapping, commands I couldn't process. Sir, stay with us. Clear. Again. I stood frozen in the corner as they worked around him. And then, just like that, it stopped. At 3:47 a.m., my father died with his hand still reaching toward me, and a sentence he never got to finish. I didn't cry. I just stood there while they turned off the machines, while they noted the time, while the room fell into a silence so heavy it felt like it was pressing down on my chest. When I finally called my mother, she started crying immediately. But the first thing she said wasn't, "Are you okay?" It wasn't, "I wish I had been there." It was, "Call your sister. Victoria needs to know." Of course she did. I called Victoria next. She picked up on the fourth ring, her voice thick with sleep. "Victoria, Dad's gone." There was a pause. Then, annoyed. "Why didn't you call sooner? You know I have a meeting at 9. I hung up before she could say anything else. Outside, the sun was just beginning to rise, a brand new day, in a world where my father no longer existed. I thought I would feel grief. Maybe part of me did, but mostly, I felt that same familiar emptiness, that hollow space where his love was supposed to be, and echoing in my mind, over and over. The desk, the hidden drawer. The funeral was nothing like the quiet moment he died. It was a spectacle. Daniel James had been a well-known businessman, respected, admired, the kind of man people spoke highly of even if they barely knew him. The church was packed. Colleagues, business partners, old friends, distant relatives I couldn't even name. Everyone had a story about how generous he was, how wise, how devoted to his family. I sat in the second row. Not the first. The second. Behind cousins I saw maybe once every 10 years. Behind my mother's book club friends who were dabbing their eyes like they had lost someone irreplaceable. At the front of the room, Victoria stood beside my mother, both dressed in flawless black. Receiving condolences like they were hosting an event instead of mourning a loss. And I sat there, hands folded in my lap, listening to strangers describe a man I had spent my entire life trying and failing to reach. Victoria stood at the front beside my mother, accepting condolences like they were greeting guests at a gala instead of a funeral. They wore matching black designer suits, perfectly tailored, perfectly composed. I stood a few rows back in a dress I had bought 5 years ago on sale, suddenly aware of how out of place I looked. When it was time for the eulogy, I stood up. I had prepared something. Not perfect, but honest. Memories. Fragments of moments I had held on to. The kind of words a daughter is supposed to say when her father is gone, before I could take a step forward. My mother's hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. "Let Victoria handle it," she said under her breath. "You know how you get in front of crowds." I opened my mouth, ready to protest. But she tightened her grip slightly. "Please. Skylar. Not today. Not today." As if there had ever been a day. I slowly sat back down. Victoria stepped forward with effortless grace. Her voice trembled at all the right moments. Her eyes filled with tears exactly when they were supposed to. She spoke about our father's wisdom, his generosity, his unwavering devotion to his family, his unconditional love. That phrase echoed in my head. Unconditional. I lowered my gaze to my hands, staring at them as if they belonged to someone else. After the service, people gathered in small clusters, offering quiet condolences that felt more like rehearsed lines than genuine comfort. I nodded, thanked them, smiled when expected. That was when a woman approached me. She looked to be in her early 60s, her silver hair pulled back tightly, her expression sharp and unreadable. "You're Skylar, aren't you?" I nodded slowly, trying to recognize her face, but nothing came. "I'm Margaret Hale," she said. "Your father's sister?" For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. "My father didn't have a sister," I said automatically. "He told us she passed away years ago." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "I see Daniel kept that story alive," she said quietly, bitterness threading through her voice. "He cut me out 25 years ago, said I was asking too many questions," before I could respond. She slipped a card into my hand. "Call me when this performance is over," she added. "There are things you deserve to know about your father." Then she turned and disappeared into the crowd as quickly as she had appeared. I looked down at the card, a phone number, and beneath it, written in firm, deliberate handwriting, "Don't trust them." 3 days later, we gathered in a law office that smelled faintly of polished wood and old money. My mother sat at the head of a long mahogany table, composed as ever. Victoria sat beside her, her husband Ethan close at her side. A few relatives filled the remaining seats, their curiosity barely concealed behind polite expressions. I took a seat at the far end. Near the door, the lawyer, a gray-haired man named Mr. Caldwell, adjusted his glasses and began. "To my beloved wife, Eleanor James. I leave the lake house in Silver Bay, along with a monthly allowance to be administered by the estate." My mother dabbed at her eyes delicately. "To my daughter, Victoria James," he continued, listing everything. The main residence on Willow Creek Drive, valued at over $1 million. Investment portfolios, savings accounts, luxury vehicles, jewelry, personal assets. The numbers blurred together, but the total was unmistakable. Over $2 million. Victoria reached for Ethan's hand, her expression carefully controlled, as if she were trying not to look pleased. Mr. Caldwell paused, then turned a page. "To my daughter, Skylar James." The room fell silent. I felt it, every gaze shifting toward me. "I leave the sum of $1. A soft laugh slipped out from somewhere in the room before being quickly stifled. I didn't move, didn't react. I just sat there, feeling the weight of their attention. Some of it was pity. Some of it wasn't. My mother stared straight ahead, her face unreadable. Victoria glanced down at her nails as if this had nothing to do with her. "Is that all I asked?" My voice sounded calmer than I felt. Mr. Caldwell nodded once. "That is the entirety of the estate distribution." I pushed my chair back and stood. The sound echoed louder than it should have. "Thank you for your time," I said. No one stopped me. No one said my name. I walked out of the room, down the hallway, and into the elevator without looking back. But just before the doors closed, I heard it, a whisper. Not meant for me, but loud enough. Not surprised. Someone muttered, "She was never really one of them anyway." The doors slid shut, and for the first time since the reading began, I finally allowed myself to breathe. The words kept circling in my mind. The desk. The hidden drawer. Maybe it was time to finally understand what my father had been trying to tell me before he died. That afternoon, I drove back to the house I had grown up in. No, not my parents' house anymore. My mother's house now. I told myself I was just there to pick up a few things I had left behind. That's what I told myself. My mother opened the door wearing a soft gray robe, her face carefully arranged into the expression of a grieving widow. "Skylar, I didn't expect you. I just need to grab some things," I said. She hesitated for a second, then stepped aside. The house felt different the moment I walked in. Not physically. Nothing had been moved. But something was missing. Something that made it feel hollow, like a stage after the performance had ended. I made it halfway to the stairs before I stopped, turned around. Why my mother froze. "Why what 32 years?" I said, my voice shaking despite my effort to keep it steady. "I need to know why. What did I do wrong?" Her expression tightened instantly. "This isn't the time. Then when is the time?" I stepped closer. "When will it ever be the time?" "Mom," she sighed, and for a brief moment, she looked older than I had ever seen her. "Your father had his reasons," she said quietly. "You should accept that and move on." "What reasons?" My voice rose. "I was there every day at the hospital. I held his hand when he died. Victoria didn't even cancel her trip. Your sister has responsibilities. And I don't." Her eyes hardened. "There are things you don't understand," she said. "Things that are better left alone. Then explain them to me." But she was already turning away. "Get your things and go." "Skylar," she said. "Some questions don't have answers you want to hear." I stood there, watching her walk into the kitchen, my chest tight with everything I wanted to say but knew wouldn't change anything. I had seen that look before. That wall. I had been hitting it my entire life. For a second. I almost followed her, almost demanded the truth. But instead, my gaze shifted down the hallway, to the door at the very end. My father's study. The door was slightly open, just enough for me to see the corner of his old oak desk through the gap. The desk, the hidden drawer. The house was quiet. My mother was in the kitchen. I had maybe 10 minutes before she realized I hadn't left. That was enough. I slipped into the study and closed the door behind me. The smell hit me immediately. Leather, cigars, paper, him. I hadn't been allowed in this room much as a child. It had always been his space, off limits, untouchable, a place reserved for him, and sometimes Victoria. The desk sat in the center of the room, heavy, solid, antique, passed down from my grandfather. I had always thought it was beautiful. Now it felt threatening. I started with the obvious drawers: documents, bills, tax records, old photographs, Victoria at every stage of her life, school awards, graduation, her wedding, smiling, celebrated, seen. There wasn't a single photo of me, not one. I kept searching. Nothing unusual, nothing hidden, until I noticed it, the bottom right drawer. It looked normal at first glance, but something about it felt off, slightly shallower than the others. I pulled it out completely and turned it over, running my fingers along the base. The wood panels weren't perfectly even. One corner sat just a little higher than it should have. My heart started pounding. I pressed down. Click. The sound echoed louder than it should have. A false bottom. My hands trembled as I lifted the panel away. Inside were three things: a yellowed envelope, a thick, leather-bound journal, and a larger sealed envelope, closed with dark wax. But it was the first one that drew me in. The yellowed envelope. My father's handwriting was on the front. Precise. Careful. A date. My birthday. The day I was born. I opened it slowly. The paper inside brittle with age, crackling softly as I unfolded it. And then I read the first line. I never wanted a second daughter. The words hit like a physical blow. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. But I kept reading. One heir is enough. One is all this family needs. When Eleanor told me she was pregnant again, I wanted it ended. She refused, so I made a decision. If this child must exist, she will take nothing from Victoria. Not opportunity, not money, not love. Everything belongs to my firstborn. The second daughter is an accident. If you were in my place, would you keep digging for the truth? Even if it meant tearing your entire family apart. If you think I was right to open that drawer, read everything, and refuse to stay silent after what I discovered. Drop a 1 in the comments. I will tolerate. Nothing more. The words blurred as I kept reading, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. Not until I heard footsteps moving somewhere down the hallway. My heart jumped. I shoved everything into my bag, grabbed the envelopes, the journal, all of it, and slipped out through the back door without making a sound. I didn't stop until I was back in my apartment, and I didn't sleep. I sat there until nearly 3 in the morning, going through every page, every line, every word my father had ever written about me, because the letter, that was only the beginning. The journal was where the truth lived. 30 years of it. Every entry written in his precise, controlled handwriting. When I was 5, the younger one asked why she couldn't take ballet like Victoria. I told Eleanor to say we couldn't afford it. She believed me. Good. My hands trembled as I turned the page. When I was 10, Skylar wanted piano lessons. I told her only serious musicians deserve that kind of investment. She isn't talented enough. She cried. She'll get over it. Another page. At 18. She wanted to study medicine. I told her I would only support accounting. Something practical. Something that keeps her close where I can control the outcome. She agreed. She always agrees. I felt sick. Every moment I thought had been my choice wasn't. Every dream I had quietly let go of had been taken from me before I even realized it was possible. When I was 25. She mentioned moving to Portland for a job opportunity. I reminded her that if she leaves, she can expect nothing from the will. She stayed. I closed my eyes for a second, my chest tightening. I remembered that moment. I thought I had chosen family. I thought I had been loyal. I thought it meant something, but it hadn't been a choice. It had been control. Every decision I had ever made, every time I had made myself smaller, quieter, easier to accept. He had orchestrated all of it. And my mother. The journal made that part painfully clear. Eleanor understands her role. If she shows the second daughter too much affection, there will be consequences. I've made the terms of our arrangement clear. I felt something break inside me. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly. Like something that had been holding me together finally gave up. I wanted to scream, to throw the journal across the room, to call my mother and demand answers she had denied me my entire life. But there was still one thing left. The sealed envelope. My hands shook as I broke the wax. Inside was a formal document, aged but carefully preserved. At the top, in bold letters, it read, "Last Will and Testament of Charles Whitmore Sr., my grandfather." The will my father had told me was lost years ago. I read it once, then again. And this time, I understood. My grandfather hadn't left everything to my father. He had divided his estate equally among all his grandchildren, all of them, including me. My breath caught. My father hadn't just ignored me, he had stolen from me. before I was even old enough to know I had something to lose. And now, I had proof. At 7 in the morning, I called Margaret. She picked up on the second ring, like she had been expecting this call. I found it, I said immediately. The will, the journal, everything. There was a long exhale on the other end. I knew he kept records. She said quietly. Daniel was always meticulous about documenting his own cruelty. We met an hour later at a small diner just outside town. Margaret didn't look surprised as I laid everything out in front of her. The letter, the journal, the will. She studied them carefully, her expression tightening with each page. Your grandfather, Charles Whitmore, he was a fair man, she said finally, her fingers resting lightly on the document. He loved his grandchildren, all of them. When he passed, he made sure everything would be divided equally. She looked up at me. That includes you, Skylar. My throat tightened. Even before you were born, she continued. He added provisions for future grandchildren. He wanted to make sure no one was left out. I let out a shaky breath, but my father told everyone that the will left everything to him. She finished. Yes, because he destroyed the original and replaced it. Her jaw clenched. I suspected it from the beginning, when I confronted him. He cut me off completely, told the family I was unstable, greedy, trying to steal from him. 25 years, I whispered. You've known for that long. Suspected, she corrected gently. I never had proof. She tapped the document in front of me. But you do. I stared down at my grandfather's signature. Real, authentic. Not the forgery my father had forced everyone to believe. What do I do with this? I asked quietly. Margaret reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. I know someone, she said. Ethan Cross. I looked up. He was your grandfather's lawyer, she continued. The one who originally drafted this will. He drafted this will, Margaret said quietly, and Daniel told everyone he was dead years ago. She let out a cold, humorless smile. Your father lied about a lot of things. I stared at her. Do you really think this lawyer will help me? I think he's been waiting 25 years for someone to walk through his door with this, she replied. She slid a phone number across the table. He'll want to hear from you. For the first time since all of this began. Something inside me shifted. It wasn't anger. It wasn't pain. It was something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Ethan Cross's office sat in a small, aging building on the edge of town. The kind of place people passed every day without ever noticing. Quiet. Forgotten. He answered the door himself. A thin man in his late 60s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. You must be Skylar, he said, extending his hand. I nodded, a little surprised. He smiled gently. You have your grandfather's eyes. Inside. The three of us sat around a cluttered desk stacked with legal files and old books. I handed over everything. The will, the journal, the letter. Ethan studied the original will in silence for a long time, his fingers tracing along the edges like he was reconnecting with something he had lost. When he finally looked up, his eyes were wet. This is it, he said softly. The will I drafted. He ran his hand along the margin. I recognized my notes. Every mark. Every word. I leaned forward slightly. Then what happened? He removed his glasses, rubbing his eyes as if the memory itself was heavy. The day after your grandfather's funeral, he said slowly. Your father called me, told me he had found a newer will, said it replaced the one I had written. My stomach tightened. I asked to see it. He continued. And he threatened me, threatened you. He said if I didn't back off, He would ruin me, have me disbarred, accuse me of fraud. He had control over everything: documents, access, reputation. And you believed him? I had no proof. Ethan admitted quietly. He was the son, the one everyone trusted. What could I do? Margaret leaned forward. But now we do have proof. Ethan nodded slowly, his gaze returning to the documents. The signature on this will is real. A handwriting expert can confirm it. He flipped open the journal, scanning a few entries. And this? He added, tapping the pages. This is essentially a written confession. I felt my pulse quicken. So what happens now? He met my eyes directly. Now, we challenge everything. My breath caught. We file in probate court. He continued. We contest the estate. With this evidence, you have a very strong case. He paused. But Skylar, you need to understand what this means. I already knew. You won't just be challenging a document, he said. You'll be going up against your mother, your sister, your entire family. I thought about the past 32 years, about silence, about being overlooked, about accepting scraps and calling it love. I know, I said. My voice didn't shake this time. I'm ready. 3 days later, my phone rang. I didn't need to look at the screen to know who it was. Word travels fast in families like mine. I answered anyway. Skylar. Sweetheart. Victoria's voice dripped with sweetness. I've been hearing some concerning things. I said nothing. People are saying you've been asking questions about the will, about Dad. A small pause. I understand you're grieving, but you really need to let this go. Why I asked? Because it's embarrassing for all of us, she said smoothly. Dad made his wishes very clear. Did he? I replied quietly. Did he really? Silence. And then the tone changed. I don't know what you think you've found. Little sister, she said. The softness gone. But I have connections. Lawyers. People who can make your life very complicated. Is that a threat? It's advice, she said lightly. From someone who cares about you. She laughed. That same delicate, dismissive laugh I had heard my entire life. Be realistic. Skylar, even if there was some irregularity, who do you think people are going to believe, you or me? And Mom. I let her words hang there for a second. Thanks for your concern. Victoria, I said calmly, you should really think about what you're doing. She hung up. I stared at my phone, my heart racing, but not from fear, from realization. She was scared. I could hear it beneath the threats, beneath the confidence. Victoria James, the perfect daughter, was actually scared. 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time, it was my mother, Skylar. Her voice was small, fragile. I need to see you. I straightened slightly. About what? A long pause. Then, almost a whisper. The letter, and what your father made me do. My grip tightened around the phone. That was not what I expected. When tomorrow, she said. The cafe on Fifth Avenue. Come alone. The call ended before I could respond. I sat there in silence, my hands trembling. After 32 years, my mother wanted to talk. Something had shifted, and I didn't know if that was a good thing or the beginning of something worse. The cafe was nearly empty when I arrived. She was already there, sitting in the corner. For a moment, I almost didn't recognize her. No makeup, no jewelry, no carefully constructed image, just a worn cardigan, and a woman who looked smaller than I had ever seen her. She held a cup of coffee in both hands, but it had long gone cold. I slid into the seat across from her. You came, she said softly. You asked. Silence stretched between us. Heavy. Unfamiliar. And then, her shoulders started to shake. I know about the letter. Skylar, my mother said, her voice breaking. I've always known. For a moment. I couldn't speak. Then the words forced their way out. Then why? Her hands trembled around the cup. Because I was a coward. Tears slipped down her face, leaving uneven trails across skin she hadn't even tried to cover. When I married your father, I had nothing. She continued. No money, no family, no safety net. He gave me everything, and he made sure I understood he could take it all away just as easily. I stared at her. So you went along with it? I asked quietly. You let him treat me like I didn't matter, he said. She choked, her voice cracking. He said if I showed you too much love, he would leave me. He would destroy me, tell everyone I was unstable, just like he did to Margaret. I felt something twist painfully inside my chest. All those years, the distance, the coldness, the way she would pull her hand away whenever I tried to hold it. It hadn't been indifference. It had been fear. Did you ever love me? I asked. The question hung between us, heavy and unavoidable. She looked up at me. Really looked this time. Every day, she whispered. Every single day. Skylar. I was just too afraid to show it. I should have been angry. I should have yelled, demanded answers, demanded justice for the childhood I never had. But looking at her now, this small, broken version of the woman I had spent my life trying to understand, all I felt was tired. Deeply, painfully tired. Did you know about Grandpa's will? I asked. She shook her head immediately. No. Your father never told me anything about money or documents. I just did what I was told. My phone buzzed suddenly on the table. A message from Daniel at work. Check Facebook. Now. A cold feeling crept up my spine as I opened the app. And then I saw it. Victoria had posted in the family group a long, carefully written message. She painted herself as the concerned older sister, the one trying to protect the family, the one dealing with a grieving, unstable sibling who was lashing out and making false accusations. Me. The comments were already pouring in. Support, sympathy, agreement. I felt my stomach drop. The war had officially begun. Let me pause for a second. If you've ever felt like the invisible one in your family, like no matter how hard you tried, it was never enough. I see you. I really do. Have you ever had to stand up to people who were supposed to love you unconditionally? What gave you the courage? Tell me in the comments. And if this story is hitting you in any way, make sure you subscribe, because what happened next changed everything. Within 24 hours, my phone turned into a battlefield. Messages flooded in from relatives I hadn't heard from in years, each one sharper than the last. Aunt Linda. Skylar. I heard what you're doing. How could you? Your father just passed away. Cousin Ryan. This is low. Even for you, trying to take money from your own mother, Uncle David. Your father had his reasons. You should respect him. Even now. I scrolled back to Victoria's post again. It was written perfectly. Concerned. Calm. Reasonable. A worried sister dealing with someone unstable. The comments kept stacking. So sorry you're dealing with this. Victoria. Family drama is the worst. Stay strong. Some people just can't handle not being the favorite. That one lingered longer than the rest. It shouldn't have mattered. But it did. The next morning, Daniel found me at my desk, staring at my screen like I hadn't slept at all. Hey, he said, pulling up a chair beside me. You okay? I let out a dry laugh. My entire family thinks I'm either crazy or greedy, I said. Or both. He leaned forward slightly. You know what I think? I looked at him. Innocent people don't run smear campaigns, he said. If your sister had nothing to hide, she wouldn't be trying this hard to make you look like the bad guy. I blinked. He wasn't wrong. That evening, a certified letter arrived at my apartment. I didn't recognize the law firm's name, but I knew exactly who it was from before I even opened it. Dear Miss James, our client, Victoria James, has retained our services regarding your recent defamatory statements concerning the James family estate. We hereby demand that you immediately cease and desist all claims, whether public or private, regarding the distribution of Daniel James's assets. Failure to comply will result in legal action, including but not limited to defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress. I lowered the paper slowly. They weren't just trying to silence me anymore. They were trying to scare me. They wanted me to back down, to disappear quietly, to accept the version of the story they had already written for me. I set the letter down slowly and reached for my phone. Ethan, I said as soon as he answered, we need to move faster. There was a brief pause on the other end. Understood. He replied, within a week. He had arranged a meeting with one of the most respected forensic document examiners in the state, Dr. Lillian Carter. Her office was exactly what I expected. Cold. Clinical. White walls reflecting harsh light, a large desk covered in magnifiers, precision tools, and stacks of documents. No warmth, no distractions, just truth. She laid everything out carefully in front of her. My grandfather's original will, the version my father had filed, samples of both men's handwriting. Give me an hour, she said. It felt like the longest hour of my life. Margaret paced the hallway, her footsteps echoing back and forth. Ethan sat still, hands folded, his expression unreadable. I stared down at my own hands, trying not to hope too much, because hope had never ended well for me before. When Dr. Carter finally stepped out, her face gave nothing away. The original will, she said, holding up the document. My breath caught. The signature is authentic. The pressure patterns, stroke formations, and natural variations are fully consistent with Charles Whitmore Sr.'s verified handwriting. My heart stumbled. And the other one? Ethan asked. Her eyes sharpened slightly. The signature on the filed will shows clear signs of forgery. Hesitation marks, inconsistent baseline alignment, unnatural pen lifts. She paused. Whoever created it traced the original, but not well enough. I swallowed. You're certain she met my gaze directly? I would stake my professional reputation on it. She handed me a thick envelope. My official report. Full documentation included. This will stand in court. Ethan exhaled slowly beside me. We have enough, he said quietly. We can file. The relief hit me so suddenly it almost knocked the air out of my lungs. Proof. Not suspicion. Not feelings. Proof. My father had lied. He had forged. He had stolen. But Dr. Carter wasn't finished. There's something else, she added. She pointed to a specific section of the journal. He references his wife being aware of the arrangement, that she knew, and remained silent. I felt my chest tighten. Margaret's voice cut in. If Eleanor knew, she said slowly, then Victoria might have known too. The room fell silent. I thought about the phone call, the threats, the panic hidden beneath her confidence. What else had she been hiding? There was only one way to find out, one move that would force everything into the open. I looked at Ethan. I want to call a family meeting. The night before that meeting, I sat alone in my apartment. The lights were off. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the city outside. The journal rested open in my lap. I had read it so many times the edges of the pages were starting to soften, but tonight, I needed to read it again. Entry from when I was 10. The girl asked why Victoria gets more for Christmas. I told her Santa knows who deserves more. She cried herself to sleep. Eleanor asked if we could give her something extra. I reminded her of our agreement. My vision blurred, but I kept going. Entry from when I was 16. Skylar brought home a scholarship application today. Wants to apply to an art program across the country. I threw it away. Told her she wasn't talented enough. She apologized for wasting my time. My hands clenched. Entry from when I was 20. She's seeing someone. A boy who wants to take her to California. I reminded her that if she leaves, she has nothing. No support. No family. She ended it the next week. I closed the journal. And for the first time, I didn't hold it in. The tears came hard. Heavy. Uncontrollable. Not the quiet kind I had learned to hide, but the kind that shook my entire body. 32 years. Every dream I had let go of. Every choice I thought I had made. Every time I had made myself smaller, quieter, easier to accept. None of it had been because I wasn't good enough. It was because I had never been allowed to be. When the tears finally stopped, the silence felt different, heavier, but clearer. And for the first time, I felt something I hadn't felt before. Not anger, not sadness. Something stronger. Resolve. Tomorrow, I would face them. Not with anger, not with revenge. With truth. Whether they accepted it or not, that would be their choice. But I was done being silent. I picked up my phone and sent one final message. Meeting confirmed. Sunday, 2 p.m. Mom's house. I'll be there. Then I turned my phone off. Lay down. And for the first time in weeks, I slept. The storm was coming. And this time, I wasn't running from it. My mother's house felt smaller than I remembered when I walked in the next afternoon. The living room was already full. My mother sat on the main sofa, her posture stiff, her face pale. Victoria sat beside her, legs crossed, expression calm, almost bored. Her husband, Ethan, stood near the window, arms folded, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Around them, scattered across the room, were relatives, aunts, uncles, cousins, people Victoria had clearly invited, an audience, witnesses, probably expecting to watch me fall apart. Well, Victoria said, her voice cutting cleanly through the room. We're all here. What's so important that you dragged everyone out on a Sunday? I stood near the fireplace, my bag resting at my feet. Thank you for coming, I said. My voice didn't shake. I know Victoria has already told you her version of what's happening. I'm here to tell you the truth. Aunt Linda let out a short, sharp scoff. We already know the truth, she said. You're trying to take money from your sister. No, I replied calmly. I'm trying to take back what was stolen from me. A ripple moved through the room. Glances exchanged. Doubt, discomfort, curiosity. This isn't about money. I continued. This is about our father, about who he really was, about decisions he made 32 years ago that none of you know about. Victoria laughed. Sharp, dismissive. This is embarrassing. Skylar, she said. You're making a scene. Am I? I bent down and opened my bag, pulling out a yellowed envelope. I found this in Dad's desk. I said, a letter he wrote the day I was born. The room went quiet, not gradually, instantly. Would you like to hear what it says? Victoria's smile flickered. My mother's hand flew to her throat. I unfolded the letter slowly and began to read. I never wanted a second daughter. Silence. Complete and absolute. I kept going, line after line, word after word, and as I read, I watched the room change. Faces that had been skeptical, hardened, dismissive, now frozen, shocked. No one laughed anymore. When I finished, I lowered the letter. Then I reached into my bag again and pulled out the journal. "This is 30 years of entries," I said, "all written by our father." I held it up for everyone to see. 30 years documenting exactly how he planned to cut me out of this family. Victoria stood abruptly. "This doesn't prove anything," she snapped. "Anyone could have written that." A forensic handwriting expert verified every page. I said calmly. I placed the report on the coffee table in front of them. "Would you like to read her findings?" No one moved. No one spoke. But that's not the most important thing I found. I reached into my bag one more time and pulled out the sealed document. "This is our grandfather's will." Uncle David leaned forward. Confusion etched across his face. "What do you mean?" "The real will, I mean," I said, my voice steady. "That our grandfather didn't leave everything to my father. He left it to all of us." I looked around the room. Every face, every person who had been lied to, every grandchild. I said, "Not just Victoria, all of us." A murmur spread like wildfire. Aunt Linda's mouth fell open. "That's not possible." "It is," I said. "Because my father forged a new will. He hid the original. He stole from every single person in this room." I opened the journal to a marked page, and he wrote about it right here. I read the line aloud. "The original will has been destroyed. No one will ever know." Victoria's face had gone completely pale. "You're lying," she said, but her voice had lost its edge. "Am I?" I met her eyes. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out the final piece, a printed email. "This is correspondence between Dad and you," I said. "From 5 years ago." I turned slightly and handed it to Ethan, where he explains everything and asks you to keep it secret. Ethan straightened, his expression shifting from confusion to something darker. "What is this?" he asked, his voice low. "Your wife has known the truth for 5 years," I said, and she chose to say nothing. The room exploded, voices rising, questions flying, accusations colliding into each other. Ethan stared at Victoria like he didn't recognize her anymore. Relatives began shouting over one another. My mother broke down, her face buried in her hands as she sobbed uncontrollably. And in the center of it all, Victoria stood frozen. For the first time in her life, she had nothing left to say. Through it all, Victoria stood completely still. For the first time in her life, she had nothing to say. No charm, no confidence, no control, just silence. I gathered my documents slowly, carefully, like none of the chaos around me could touch me anymore. "I'm not here for revenge," I said, my voice steady. "I'm here because everyone in this room deserves to know who Daniel James really was." I turned toward the door, behind me. Victoria's voice finally broke through, but it wasn't calm anymore. It was a scream. "You can't do this to me." I paused, my hand resting on the doorknob. "This is my family." I didn't turn around right away. "No," I said quietly. "It's ours." Then I looked back at her, and for the first time, I'm claiming my place in it. I didn't leave immediately. Part of me needed to see what came next. The room had completely unraveled. Ethan stood a few steps away from Victoria now. The printed email crumpled in his hand. "You knew," he said, his voice tight. "You knew all of this. And you said nothing. I didn't." "It wasn't like that," Victoria stammered, reaching for him. "Ethan, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" he snapped. pulling back. That you watched your own sister get treated like she didn't exist while you took everything. It wasn't my fault, she cried. Dad made me promise. And that makes it okay. Across the room, Aunt Linda had cornered my mother. Eleanor, is this true? She demanded. Did Daniel really do all of this? My mother couldn't even answer. She just sat there, crying, shaking her head, looking like she had aged decades in a matter of minutes. Cousin Ryan was reading through the journal over Uncle David's shoulder. Jesus. I heard him mutter under his breath. Everywhere. People were whispering, looking at me differently now, some with shock, some with guilt, some with something that looked a lot like regret. Then Aunt Linda approached me, the same woman who had sent me that message just days ago. Skylar. Her voice was rough. I didn't know. None of us did. I understand, I said quietly. No. She shook her head, gripping my hand. You don't. We should have seen it. We should have asked questions. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. Behind her, Victoria was still trying to reach Ethan. He wasn't listening anymore. I caught my mother's eyes from across the room. There was something there I couldn't quite name. Shame, regret, and something that almost looked like a plea. But I didn't know if I could answer it. I turned and walked out. Margaret was waiting by my car. You okay? She asked. I took a deep breath. The air outside was cool, crisp, clean. Nothing like the suffocating weight inside that house. Yeah, I said. And for the first time in 32 years, I think I actually am. I was almost at the car when I heard the front door open behind me. Skylar. Wait. My mother's voice. Small. Broken. I stopped. But I didn't turn right away. I heard her footsteps on the gravel. Slow and uncertain. Please. Just a moment. I turned. She looked nothing like the woman I had grown up with. Mascara smeared, hands trembling, the carefully constructed image. Gone. Can you ever forgive me? She asked. The question hung between us in the cold air. 32 years. All those birthdays wondering why I wasn't enough. All those nights crying alone in my room while Victoria got everything I had ever wanted. All those times I reached for her. And she pulled away. Mom, I said, my voice steady. For 32 years, all I wanted was for you to love me. My throat tightened. But I kept going. I tried everything. I did everything right. I tried to be perfect. I met her eyes, and the whole time, you knew. She broke down. I was scared. She sobbed. I was your daughter. I said quietly, I was scared too. My voice softened, but it didn't break. I was just a child. I needed you. She had no answer, just tears. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said after a moment. Maybe one day. I took a breath. But right now, I know this. I don't need your approval anymore, and I don't need his. I felt something lift inside me as I said it. I spent my whole life trying to earn something that was never being offered. Another breath. I was always worthy of love. I looked at her one last time. I was just born into a family that couldn't give it. Her knees gave out, and she sank onto the porch steps, crying too hard to speak. I turned and walked to my car. Margaret opened the passenger door for me. You did good, she said quietly. I nodded as I got in. I know. For the first time, I actually knew. We drove away, and I didn't look back. 2 weeks later, Ethan Cross officially filed the lawsuit. The story spread quickly. Local headlines picked it up. Prominent family faces estate fraud allegations. There was a photo of my father attached to every article, smiling, polished, the same image the world had always believed. Victoria hired a team of high-powered lawyers, the kind who charged more in an hour than I made in a week. They sent letters, threats, warnings, promises to bury us in paperwork and legal pressure. Ethan wasn't concerned. Let them try. He said during one of our meetings, "The evidence speaks for itself." He tapped the file in front of him. "The original will, verified signatures, and your father's own journal." He looked at me. "No strategy can erase that." The process was exhausting. Depositions, endless questions, hours in sterile conference rooms answering the same thing again and again. Victoria testified first. I watched through a screen as she sat there, composed at first, and then slowly unraveling under pressure. I watched through the video feed as Victoria sat there, composed at first, answering questions with that same polished confidence she had always relied on. But under pressure, it started to crack. Her voice wavered. Her answers became slower, less certain. And then they showed her the email, the one that proved she had known for 5 years. Everything changed. "I was just trying to protect my family," she said, her voice breaking as tears spilled down her face. "I didn't know it was illegal." Margaret's hand tightened around mine. "She's lying," she whispered. She knew exactly what she was doing. Maybe she did. Or maybe she had spent so long living in my father's shadow that she didn't even know the difference anymore between protecting something and becoming part of it. The story spread quickly after that, faster than I expected. People who had once admired my family stopped calling, stopped inviting us to events. The country club quietly revoked our membership. The James name, once associated with wealth and respect, became something people whispered about behind closed doors. Then one morning, I received an email I wasn't expecting. From Ethan. Subject: "We need to talk." The message was short. "I have something you need to see. We met at a small coffee shop across town, neutral ground, somewhere neither of our families would think to look." He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. "Thanks for coming," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "Your email was vague," I replied. "I know. I just—" He ran a hand through his hair, letting out a breath. "I've been replaying everything since that day. 10 years of marriage. Everything Victoria ever told me about you. I stayed quiet. She said you were difficult, jealous, unstable, that your parents had done everything they could for you." He let out a bitter laugh. And I believed her. I didn't say anything. Because what was there to say? What changed? I finally asked. Ethan reached into his jacket and pulled out a small flash drive. "After you left that day, I started looking." He slid it across the table. "Victoria has a password-protected folder on her laptop. Turns out she used our anniversary date." Another hollow laugh. Inside, there were years of emails. "Between her and your father." My stomach tightened. "And this?" I asked quietly, glancing at the drive. "Proof," he said. "Proof that Victoria didn't just know about the will. She helped cover it up." I looked up sharply. "There are documents," he continued, his voice strained. "Bank transfers, communications with lawyers, plans to shut down any investigation before it even started." He shook his head slowly. "She wasn't just watching. Skylar. She was part of it." I stared at the flash drive in my hand. So small, so simple, and yet, it carried the weight of everything. "Why are you giving this to me?" I asked. Ethan met my eyes. "Because I filed for divorce this morning." The words settled heavily between us. "And because I spent 10 years married to someone who watched her own sister suffer and did nothing." He stood up, then paused. "I can't change what I didn't see," he said quietly. "But I can help you now." He hesitated for just a second. For what it's worth. I'm sorry. Then he walked away. I sat there for a long time after he left, turning the flash drive over in my hands. One more piece of truth. One more thing my father thought would never come to light. And I hadn't even had to fight for it. Let me pause here for a moment. When Ethan handed me that flash drive, I didn't know what I was feeling. Relief, sadness, maybe even a little bit of closure. Have you ever had someone surprise you by doing the right thing when you least expected it? Someone you thought would never change, suddenly stand up when it mattered. Tell me in the comments. And if you're still here with me, thank you. We're close to the end now. Make sure you subscribe, because what happens next ties everything together. 3 days later, Victoria called me. There was no sweetness in her voice this time, just desperation. We need to talk, she said. Please, just 10 minutes. We met at a park near her new apartment. She was already sitting on a bench when I arrived. For a moment, I barely recognized her. No designer clothes, no perfect makeup, just a worn sweater and dark circles under her eyes. Ethan left me, she said flatly. He took everything he could. The evidence, the files. I know, I said quietly as I sat down, leaving space between us. She flinched. So that's it, she continued. You win. I shook my head. This was never about winning. She turned toward me, her eyes filling with tears. Then what do you want? She asked. I'll give you money. Half of everything. More than half. Just drop the lawsuit. Please, let this end. I let out a soft breath. You really think this is about money? A sad smile crossed my face. No, I said. It never was. Then what she whispered. I turned to face her fully. I want the truth. She went still. Look me in the eye, I said, my voice steady, and tell me. You knew what Dad was doing. You knew for years. I held her gaze, and you said nothing. Her face crumpled. For a long moment, she couldn't speak. And then, barely above a whisper, I knew everything. Victoria whispered, and I was too selfish to care. The words hung in the air between us, heavy, irreversible. Why, I asked quietly. I'm your sister. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, her voice trembling, because I was scared. She said, if I spoke up, I would end up like you. I didn't move. The invisible one. She continued, the one nobody wanted. I let those words settle, really settle. Then I stood. When you're ready to take responsibility, I said calmly. Really take it. You know where to find me. She reached out slightly. Skylar. Please. No. I turned and walked away. This time, I didn't look back. The courtroom was packed on the day of the hearing. The story had spread further than I ever imagined. Reporters filled the back rows. People who used to call my parents friends sat scattered throughout the room, pretending they weren't there to watch everything fall apart. I sat beside Ethan Cross. Margaret was on my other side. Across the aisle, Victoria sat between her lawyers, shoulders tense, her confidence gone. She looked smaller. My mother wasn't there. I wasn't surprised. The proceedings moved quickly. Ethan laid everything out with precision. The original will, the forensic report, the journal, the emails. Each piece building on the last. Until the truth wasn't just clear, it was undeniable. Victoria's lawyers tried to interrupt, tried to question, tried to create doubt where there was none, but there was too much evidence, and everyone in that room knew it. The moment everything shifted came when Ethan took the stand. He spoke calmly, carefully, clearly. Yes, His wife had known about the forged will. Yes, she had helped conceal it. Yes, he had proof. Emails, financial records, documentation. When he finished speaking, the courtroom fell completely silent, not a single sound. The judge called a brief recess. I stepped outside, needing air, needing space, and found myself face to face with Aunt Linda. "I just want you to know," she said quietly. "I believe you." I looked at her, surprised. I think most of us do now. Before I could respond, we were called back inside. The judge didn't keep us waiting. He had already made his decision. He looked down at the documents one last time before speaking. "It is the ruling of this court." My heart pounded in my chest. That the will filed under Daniel James was obtained through fraud and misrepresentation. A pause. "The original will of Charles Whitmore Sr. is hereby reinstated." The words echoed. "The estate will be redistributed according to its authentic terms." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then it hit me. Relief. Sharp. Overwhelming. Final. It was over. After everything. The lies. The manipulation. The years of being invisible. It was finally over. Ethan turned to me and shook my hand. Margaret pulled me into a quiet, steady embrace, across the room. Victoria sat completely still, staring ahead, as if she couldn't quite process that everything had changed. I found my mother sitting on a bench outside the courthouse. She hadn't come inside, but she had been there the whole time, waiting. I sat down beside her without saying anything at first. "It's done," I said finally. She nodded faintly. "I know," she whispered. I heard from the hallway. We sat there in silence. People walked past us, their conversations blending into a distant hum. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. Just sitting there, in the aftermath of everything that had finally come to light. "I don't expect you to forgive me," my mother said quietly. "I know I don't deserve it." I looked at her. "Then, what do you want?" She turned toward me fully this time, really looked at me, maybe for the first time in my life. "I want you to know that I loved you," she said, "every day, even when I couldn't show it." Her hand trembled as she reached toward mine. "I know that doesn't fix anything," she continued. "I know I failed you in every way a mother can fail." I swallowed. "Then why didn't you protect me?" She closed her eyes briefly. "Because I was weak." The word fell between us like a confession. "Your father controlled everything," she said. "The money, the house, our entire life. When he threatened to leave me with nothing, I believed him." Tears streamed down her face. "I was so afraid of losing everything that I lost you instead." I didn't speak. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she said. "I'm asking if there's any chance at all that we could start over." I sat there, thinking, not reacting, thinking. Could I forgive her? Could I trust her? Could anything real grow from the ruins of 32 years of silence and pain? I didn't have those answers. Not yet. "I can't promise anything," I said slowly, "but I'm willing to try. If you are." Her hand closed around mine. Warm. Real. For the first time in longer than I could remember, it felt genuine. "I am," she whispered. "I promise I am." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't healing. But it was something. It was a beginning. 3 months after the verdict, I heard from Victoria again. Not through lawyers, not through threats, just a message. "Can we meet?" She had moved into a small apartment on the edge of the city. Everything about her old life was gone. The luxury, the space, the image. What remained was simple. A couch, a small table, boxes still unpacked. When she opened the door, I barely recognized her. She looked thinner, quieter, and there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "I didn't think you'd come," she said. "Neither did I replied. We sat across from each other at her kitchen table. She offered coffee. I nodded. "The divorce is finalized," she said. Wrapping her hands around the mug, Ethan kept the house, most of the assets. The prenup didn't really protect me. Once everything came out, I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. "I've been seeing a therapist," she added after a moment, letting out a soft, almost humorless laugh. "First time in my life." She looked down at her hands. "Turns out being the golden child messes you up too. Just in a different way." I met her eyes. "Is that supposed to make me feel sorry for you?" "No," she said quickly. "It's not an excuse. It's just an explanation." She set the mug down. "I knew what Dad was doing," she said quietly. "I knew." Her voice trembled. "And I chose to stay quiet because I was terrified of losing my place, of becoming you." The words didn't sting the way they used to. They just settled. "That's the truth," she said. "The ugliest part of it. I watched you go through everything and told myself it wasn't my responsibility." Silence filled the space between us. "So what now?" I asked. She took a shaky breath. "Now, I try to be someone different," she said. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it." She looked at me. "But I needed you to know. I'm sorry. For all of it." I studied her face. Really studied it. For the first time. Without anger. "I can't forgive you," I said. "Not yet. But I'm not going to spend my life hating you either." Her shoulders dropped slightly. It wasn't closure, but it was something. 6 months later, my life looked completely different. The estate had been settled, and for the first time in my life, I finally received what had always been mine. It wasn't the millions Victoria once had, but it was enough. Enough to pay off every debt that had been weighing me down for years. Enough to put a down payment on a small condo of my own. Enough to finally feel like I could breathe without something pressing on my chest. But the truth is, the money wasn't what changed me. I started therapy. Real therapy. Twice a week. The kind where you don't just talk. You unpack everything you've been carrying for decades. 32 years of being told, in 100 different ways, that I wasn't enough. It's not easy. Some days I walk out of those sessions feeling like I've been pulled apart and put back together in a way I don't fully understand yet. But I'm learning about boundaries, about self-worth, about the difference between trying to earn love and expecting to be treated with respect. My mom and I have lunch together every other week now. It's awkward sometimes. We're both learning how to talk honestly after a lifetime of silence. She's not the mother I used to dream about, but she's trying to become the one she should have been. And for now, that's enough. Victoria sent me a birthday card last month. The first one she's ever sent me. Inside, she wrote, "I'm still figuring out who I am without Dad's shadow. I hope you'll give me time." I haven't replied. But I didn't throw it away either. Margaret. She's become something I never expected. Family. The kind that actually shows up. The kind that tells the truth. We have dinner every Sunday. She tells me stories about my grandfather, about the man my father could have been if he had made different choices. A few days ago, my coworker Daniel asked me something. "Do you regret any of this?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. And then I said no. Because for 32 years, I lived someone else's story. I followed rules I didn't know existed. I played a role that had already been written for me. But now, I smiled. Now I'm finally writing my own. And for the first time, it's a story I actually want to read. I learned that silence can quietly shape an entire life, and truth, no matter how painful, is the only way to take it back. What would you do if you discovered your place in your own family was decided long before you had a voice? Would you stay quiet, or finally speak up? Did you stay with me until the end? Thank you for being here. It truly matters. If this story meant something to you, a simple like, comment, or subscription from you could help someone else out there find the courage they've been missing.